All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mike. You have now arrived in my train of thought. This is the Week 11 Railway Path. There are so many things to get to, and some team seasons are done. Let's get to business. 3 games kind of broke out between the Eagles and the Commanders last Thursday night. The first of which, a decent defensive performance, which was very interesting to see because neither defense played all that well against higher-end competition, especially the Commanders. And then we saw part 2 of this, Jake Elliott's inability to make kicks. No matter how long they were, no matter their stakes, whether they be for 1 point or for 3, he just couldn't make kicks for a lot of this game, and it was alarming. And it became a theme for a good amount of kickers in this league. More on that later. But then we get to part 3, which is a lot of the fourth quarter, and Saquon Barkley saying, "I'm in God mode, you cannot stop me." That's effectively what happened towards the end of this game, the last 2 drives, where the Eagles made this more of an easier win than it truthfully was. Having Saquon Barkley will do that. And the thank you Giants chants in the fourth quarter were absolutely hilarious. It is not as hilarious as the Empire State Building being lit up in midnight green once upon a time, but it will do. It will settle for the silver medal. Signature win for the Eagles, and for the Commanders, it's another sign of you're good, but you're not great yet. Your time may come. It just won't come right away for you. What happened to Jacksonville probably shouldn't be suitable for children. This was a bludgeoning and a beating. And this is the third such beating that Detroit has given out this year. They've done this to a lot of really bad teams. They've done this to the Titans, they've done this to the Jags, and they've done this to the Cowboys. The Jaguar beating was a merciless one to the point where if Detroit had more time, they probably could have hung 60, 70, and maybe even further than that. This was kind of sort of unnecessary and also very hilarious. Maybe they're trying to get Jared Goff the MVP. Maybe they're trying to make a BCS playoff run. I have no idea. The point is, the Lions are very merciless when it comes to if they know they can beat you down and they know they've got you, you stay down. And this continued. How Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson still have their jobs, I have no idea. We were promised that the Jaguars would make some major changes in the event of a beatdown. Well, the beatdown happened, yet no changes have gone down. Shad Khan, what are you doing and why aren't you doing it? Another team season who is relatively done are the New York Jets. No matter what they do, no matter how hard they try, no matter who they try to get to appease and acquiesce to Aaron Rodgers, they can't get anywhere forward. 1-5 since the firing of Robert Saleh, and this one is another devastating loss. Certainly on the Patriots tier of, I can't believe we lost this game. How'd they do it? Well, they didn't show up in the first half. They were stuck in traffic in either New York or New Jersey, take your pick, and the Colts took care of business for a lot of the half. They got in right before halftime, started to go to work and handle biz. Breece Hall continuing to be Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, same deal. But then the end of the game happens, and Anthony Richardson had 2 gotta-have-it drives. Not only did he have to have it, he had to have it in the New York minute, and he got it even quicker. Very well done, and a nice angry run, too. I'm very happy to see that angry run by Anthony Richardson. Maybe he was just frustrated for being on the bench for a couple of weeks. Maybe he, like the Florida Gators, had to get some pent-up frustrations out on somebody. Florida beating LSU was hilarious. Anyway, back to Richardson and the Colts. Good win for Indy to get this deal done, to take care of business here, and to come together against a team who truly fell apart or is falling apart. And it's to the point where Joe Douglas is now gone and fired, and I think he's going to have a job real soon if he wants one, because overall I think he's a good GM. I think he just got a taste of the New York Jets, and they'll do that to you. The Zach Wilson pick was not great, but to be fair, it's not really his fault. Trevor Lawrence aside, who else were you really going to pick in this draft? None of the other 4 guys are A, on the team they drafted, or B, good. So, there we are. I think Joe Douglas can get a job, and watch said team who hires him actually turns into a pretty good squad when they do hire him. As for the Jets, your season's over, but I could have told you that months ago. Another team season who was effectively done are the Raiders, and unlike the Jets, they didn't have too many expectations. Though I am a little disappointed in Antonio Pierce. I thought he'd be better at his job than what he currently is. That's a little disappointing. Anyway, what the Raiders did do that was good, however, was unleash Brock Bowers. Bowers is a very good tight end. I think we all saw this coming out of the draft that he would be good. He has lived up to the hype so far. He looked very impressive. And they also took away the deep ball and said, Miami, you will not beat us deep. You will not beat us with home runs to Tyreek or to Jalen Waddle. Instead, Miami decided to go death by 1,000 paper cuts, and that was probably even worse because the Raider defense got no time to rest, especially the first two drives, and Tua Tagovailoa and company really just diced up the Raider defense throughout the game. They didn't punt in this game. They scored on every real drive they had, Miami did, and to be honest, it never really felt like the Dolphins were ever going to actually lose the game. And obviously the Jonnu Smith second touchdown in the game sealed it, but again, it never really felt like the Dolphins were actually going to lose. They just felt like the better team from the word go. They just had to put the game away. The second Smith tutty did that. He was wide open on that play. I don't know how he pulled that off, Raiders. But anyway, good win for Miami as they continue to try to save their season. Raiders is probably for the best that your prayers, well, Shedeur Sanders' prayers are answered and you guys are able to take him with the first or second pick of the draft. That time may come, Raiders. You're going to have to fight the Titans for it, though. Tennessee is also in the scrap heap or junkyard of teams whose seasons are effectively dead. And Tennessee's record is also going to allow them to have a real shot at the quarterback if they so choose to want one. And they kind of need one. Will Levis didn't meme, which is kind of weird. He also had a 98-yard touchdown pass, which is also kind of weird. They actually put up a decent fight against the Vikings, which, Minnesota, I'm a little concerned about you. You guys are not looking so hot over the last few weeks, and it really is against the AFC South. Yes, you've won all 4 games in that division, but the last 3 have not looked great at all. Sam Darnold was not as awful as he was against the Colts, but he was not great, or at least as great as he was to start this year. So, Minnesota, you got your win, take it and run. Tennessee, you took your L, take it and run. I think it's for the best for all parties involved. It's not the worst thing to happen to a team that plays their games in Tennessee. The Volunteers lost by 2 scores to the Georgia Bulldogs, which is also not great for those who cheer for both the Vols and the Titans. Not great. This was just another average weekend for the Cleveland Browns and their fan base, where they arrive with some sort of optimism, they get buried alive by a dominant performance, and the game ends, and they leave and go home. That's kind of what we've been accustomed to when it comes to Cleveland Browns games since the Browns have been back. Taysom Hill basically saw what Tyler Warren did to Purdue and was like, you know what? I can do a lot of that too. And he did. He ran for a lot of yards. He caught for some more. He scored touchdowns all over the place. He did throw an NO, though. Tyler Warren doesn't do that. That's the difference between a solid NFL tight end, I guess, currently in Taysom Hill, and a future good NFL tight end and current best tight end in the country. Anyway, back to the Saints. Good win for New Orleans, their second straight win, and suddenly the Saints are 4-7. Unfortunately, the NFC has so much depth to it, they might be making a run a little bit too late, and that's incredibly frustrating for those who just want to see New Orleans tank. Speaking of which, the Patriots, who I don't think are really tanking. I just don't think they have the talent to keep up with the higher-end squads when they're not making really dumb mistakes. See Bengals game week 1. Anyway, the Rams have high-end talent. When Matt Stafford is rolling and those receivers, Kupp and Nakua and Kyron Williams, when those guys are rolling, it's hard to stop them. And they proved as such. You had Kupp and Nakua both have really good 100-yard days. Kupp scored twice, Nakua once. Kyron Williams is for some reason on a touchdown drought, which is so unlike him. But anyway, the Rams got busy and it took care of things on offense. Now, the defense could have been better. The defense certainly could have made its bones, but part of that's Drake May being efficient and Drake May being pretty good. He threw it 40 times, which is not something I would truly recommend. But Drake May is showing himself to be a pretty solid quarterback for New England. I don't know if winning is the play, but I do think that as long as the Patriots are looking somewhat respectable, they're going to have a fighting chance in a lot of different games. Now, unlike the Jets, Browns, Jaguars, Raiders, Patriots, and Titans, I don't think Chicago wants to tank. Unfortunately, they might not have a choice. Let's examine why. I think a lot of people thought that Chicago had to stack wins early and then be so late to make the playoffs. That was kind of my thinking in terms of their playoff standing. And they could not stack wins. To be honest, the Bears haven't recovered since the Hail Mary, and what happened to them on Sunday might be worse than that. They outplayed the Packers for a lot of this game. They looked like the better team. They felt like the better team. Caleb Williams was very productive in this game. DeAndre Swift handled his business. The Packer defense looked pretty terrible for a lot of this game, and to be honest, they were able to stay in it, Green Bay, because of their high-end talent on offense making high-end plays. Christian Watts is probably the most talented Packer receiver, and he was making some crazy big plays during this game. Josh Jacobs took care of business and scored a touchdown. And then when Green Bay's defense needed to show up the most, they did. And then they left. It was not great. Allowing a 3rd and 19 anywhere in a particular game, especially at the end of it, is a horrible look. Anyway, we get to the end, and it felt like, okay, Chicago's actually got this. They're going to finally beat them. And then they didn't learn from the Broncos, and the kick was blocked. And they didn't learn anything because the field goal protection was also pretty bad on the left side, and that's what got the kick blocked. And Green Bay to survive a game they probably shouldn't have survived or won. This is going to hurt. The real question is this the worst loss the Bears have had this year? As for the Packers, take your win and run. Do not ask questions. Do not look back. You do not come back for your belongings. That you can have them shipped to you, whatever. Just run. Just get out of Chicago and run with your W. You probably didn't deserve it, but you got it. So just take it and run. That's all you need to do. Other than the NFC equivalent of this game in terms of location, obviously Beltway versus Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in every other instance, we've had one really bad team against either a decent team or a team with a bad record. This is the only other instance before the 4 o'clock games where we don't have such a thing. Ravens-Steelers, and this was a Steeler game in terms of how it played out. It was ugly. It was a street fight. It was physical. And yet, this should have been a win for the Ravens. And you need to know what happened to Justin Tucker. Like, did he get Freaky Friday? Did he get his powers taken Monstar style? What happened here? Like, why is Justin Tucker suddenly missing kicks? He's the most accurate kicker of all time for a lot of his career, and suddenly he is inaccurate. This is really odd. Also, the Derrick Henry fumble. That doesn't happen that often. And yet it's the first time he's done it as a Raven. What a horrible time for it. And even with all of this, the Ravens defense got back to being the Raven defense. They started playing really well once again. They didn't allow any touchdowns. And they scored 2 of them. That is good. And yet they lost. Why? Because Chris Boswell, who bailed them out in a similar way against the Chiefs in the divisional round a few years ago. This is the last Steelers playoff win, by the way, by the exact same score. And he did it again. Another 6 field goal performance by Boswell. And the Steelers defense did just enough throughout this game, including especially at the very end with the 2-point conversion that could have tied the game. They ended up surviving and advancing, Pittsburgh did, and winning in a ridiculously Steeler way. For Baltimore, it's another loss, their 4th, and in every case, they could have been avoidable. So say goodbye to your chances of getting the number 1 seed. And for Pittsburgh, you've got a real shot at it if you know what you're doing and can actually score touchdowns. That would also be helpful. Speaking of touchdowns and good teams scoring them, the Broncos did that. And the Broncos are a good team, contrary to what we thought Denver would actually be going into this season. They looked incredibly impressive. Now, true, Atlanta's defense isn't the greatest. They don't really have a pass rush, and when they can't get home or cause some sort of mayhem with turnovers, they can get exposed and look really bad. Bo Nix diced the Falcons up. There's no other way to say this. As for Kirk Cousins playing a real defense, not great. It's not great. Denver responded after the blocked kick game, and the Broncos look like a legit team that's got a real shot at making the playoffs. Schedule not the greatest at the last month of the season, but ultimately, the Broncos got a real shot at making the postseason. Atlanta probably does too because their division's so bad, but Atlanta's not going to. Falcon is, right? Right? Niners, we might have to talk. That was not good. And I get it. You don't have George Kittle. So you don't have Kittle, you don't have IU. So that's half of your Voltron situation missing. I would say that's the left arm and the right leg or something. I guess that's the way we're doing this. And then you lose the second best player on your defense in Nick Bosa to an injury that may keep him out longer term, depending on what happens after the Niners bye. Yet, Seattle's a team you've owned, and you've dominated since Russell Wilson left. You've handled business for the last almost 3 years against Seattle, and yet you couldn't. You needed to stop Kenneth Walker on a drive and could not. You needed to stop Jackson Smith and Jigba or DK Metcalf, and at times you could not. You didn't cause Geno Smith to make those back-breaking mistakes like you did the first time you played Seattle in that Thursday night game, and then Geno beat you at the very end with good Geno Smith play. For Seattle, it is a win that they horribly needed against the team they horribly needed to beat the most, and they got it. For the Niners, it is another devastating sign of this just isn't your year, and there's no other way to say this. So what do you do if you're San Francisco? Do you continue to try going up this mountain and going up this hill that it's clear that you guys aren't capable of reaching the summit, or chalk it? What happens to Brock Purdy going forward? Do you rest him because of the injury, or do you try to ride it out with Purdy? So many questions that will need to be answered for the Niners over the last 7 weeks of the season. Good luck, San Francisco. You'll need all of it. Yes, Buffalo's annual Super Bowl against the Chiefs. The game where they show up the best, the game where they put on their brightest uniforms and they look the cleanest and they play relatively the cleanest. This was a very good Josh Allen game. He played well. He was the best player on the field, as you would want for your quarterback to be in a situation like this. Pat Mahomes was not very good. Grand opening, grand closing, both with NOs. Not great. Still, Buffalo was impressive. There's no other way to say it. They were the better team. And it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't like what happened with the Broncos game. It wasn't like how Buffalo beat Miami this year with the Bass field goal. It was just straight up. Buffalo was superior on Sunday in Orchard Park. And with that, Kansas City is the last undefeated that goes down, which means the 72 Dolphins legacy is preserved for another year. Buffalo, good job on that front. For Kansas City, they'll be fine. This has happened literally the last 2 years, where a Bills team beats the Chiefs and the Chiefs go on and win the title. Will history repeat itself? And now we get to Burrow versus Herbert, quarterback battle that a lot of people were anticipating when they flexed this game to the Sunday night game and saved us all, thank you NBC and NFL, from Colts Jets on primetime. We appreciate you for that. And what we got was some bungling in the first half. We got a beatdown from the Chargers for the first 30 minutes of this game. This was looking real bad for Cincinnati. And then the charging kicks in for the second half of this game. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase prove why they've been the best combo in the game this year, and they proceeded to cook. T. Higgins said, let me get in on this, and Burrow said, say less. He proceeded to cook. The Bengals didn't make mistakes in the second half for the most part, and they were flawless, and the game was tied. And now we got the QB duel that we've always wanted for Burrow and Herbert, I guess, right? And then we get Evan McPherson, and all Cincinnati needs is a field goal to take the lead. And then he missed. And then they got another shot. Okay, it's a little further out, but he can make this kick. And then he didn't. Both kicks hooked to the left. Not great. Chargers said, all right, that's enough of this. That's enough of this charging. We'll get back to the bungling. And then J.K. Dobbins gets the go-ahead touchdown with not too much time left. And now, no field goal could save you because you need 7 instead of 3. They did not get their 7. Another devastating loss by the Bengals because Joe Burrow, with a better record, is probably your NFL MVP right now because he has been that good. And Jamar Chase, with a better record, will probably be the Offensive Player of the Year. Yet the Bengals are 4-7. And those two, T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson, don't deserve a 4-7 team. Chargers, you didn't charge it for once. Good work. You're looking like a playoff team as well. That Broncos-Charger game may be for a playoff spot. We'll see you in due time. Now, some would argue that the Cowboys season has been more disappointing than the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight. Others would argue that the all-in efforts from Jerry Jones are lagging harder than the Netflix app did while covering said Paul v. Tyson fight. Some would argue that the Cowboys' season and empire is collapsing like AT&T Stadium tried to do on Monday night. All these things are true, and their season is as bad and probably worse than I'm describing. This is another example of a Cowboys home game gone horribly wrong, because all Cowboys home games have gone horribly wrong since the calendar flipped to 2024. And the Texans this time were the team that needed to get right, and they got right. Joe Mixon stayed right. 3 more tutties, which probably won people fantasy games. CJ Stroud made one mistake, the terrible NO to Malik Hooker, which offset a terrible fake punt idea, and the signature play being that strip sack by Derek Barnett, and in a classic ball don't lie moment, Derek Barnett got the ball back after a second fumble and took it to the crib. Many Cowboy haters enjoyed what they saw on Monday Night Football. The Manning cast was easily the most entertaining broadcast of the particular 3 hours in question. There are many ways to describe the Cowboys season coming to a very abrupt and quick end, but there is one more way that I have not described. Brandon Aubrey missed a kick that's normally makeable by his standards and in some cases in his sleep. Now sure, he made a 64-yard one later on in the day, but the fact that he actually missed a kick that he normally makes while blindfolded probably, that's a little surprising. What hasn't been surprising is that my picks continue to cook. I went 12-2 in week 11, and my overall record is 109-58. Coming up tomorrow, power rankings. How far will Kansas City drop? Will they drop at all? How high will the Bills jump? And will the Bills jump ahead of the Chiefs? There are so many things at the top that will probably change, but one thing at the bottom will remain the same. Jacksonville, you will be the first stop of my next train of thought.